Our next speaker, I said this early, and I know you're going to get me for this later, Dave, because I said he was from Berkeley. But I'm going to read this because it's too much for me to remember. Dave Collum received a BS in biology in 1977 from Cornell University, majoring in genetics. Concluding there was nothing left of any importance to be studied in genetics, he moved on to Columbia University, where he earned his PhD in organic chemistry. He received his PhD in 1980, returned to Cornell as an assistant professor, where he's currently the Betty R. Miller Professor of Chemistry and Department Chair. He's an associate editor of the Journal of Organic Chemistry, consults for and collaborates with many pharmaceutical companies. And while maintaining a highly active research program, he's developed an interest in the markets and politics. And last night, we had dinner with this guy, and I've not laughed this hard in a long time. So I don't know if he'll be funny today, but he was hysterical last night. So the only thing he promised was he's going to talk a lot about snowflakes today, so that's the big issue. Welcome to the stage, David Collum.
Academic talks don't have lights like this. These are unbelievable. I'd love to change my talk right now, just listening to these guys. Hold on. I don't have any slides, but I also have a little Rick Perry in me. And so I occasionally will have to refer to it because my brain will just shut down. First, I'd like to thank the organizers for inviting me and for bailing us out last night, the posting bond. So I had a bunch of possible topics, and I can't talk about valuations. That's been annihilated, by the way. I agree, it's twofold overvalued. I have this tendency to pick up these little maxims. Overvalued is appreciation pulled forward. Undervalued is appreciation deferred. So if you're overvalued, it's just appreciation you're not going to get. The reason that helps me is because I realize that from here, any appreciation gain, you're going to give it all back. So if you feel like sitting in cash is losing you money, it's all coming back. And so if you're a trader, right, we learned last night that if you're a trader, the market's either doing this or this. There, I just won. What else am I going to talk about? I've spoken at investment conferences. One time I spoke about the Roth IRA. I spent a half an hour debunking it. I can do that in about 20 seconds now. It turns out the Roth versus the regular, if you get the same returns and you pay the same tax rate, you get the same end result. That's fourth grade math. The difference between the Roth and the regular is that the Roth, you pay the marginal tax rate, and the regular, you pay the effective tax rate. Now, if you want to dig deeper, but once you wrap your brain around that, you'll realize the Roth IRA will never be as good as the regular IRA. And I bounced that off 1,000 people in a room and said, please tell me if it's wrong, and no one did. So the Roth IRA is a scam, and it also pulls revenue forward, so that's a bad idea. I'd love to talk about valuation. I'm 53, 55% cash myself. You have to be in cash at the top to be in cash at the bottom. It's actually very simple. And so, this isn't even working. God damn it. So there's a story I like. Got it from a TED lecture. Girl's in the back of the room. She's coloring. And the teacher says, what are you doing? She says, I'm coloring a picture of God. And teacher says, no one knows what God looks like. And she says, they will in a minute. Another kid gets asked to describe himself in 3 words. And he says, I am a rebel. That's 4 words. I was one time sitting in the back of a lecture coloring. This was probably 6 months ago. And I was thinking about a topic that if I asked 1,000 chemists to explain something, 1,000 chemists would agree. And it clicked that they're all wrong. It's a truism of chemistry. I'm not going to go into it, but I realized they're wrong. And it literally just required a few minutes of thought coming at it from another angle. So I realized that what I do is I think in childish ideas. And I reduce complex ideas down to the so over-reduced to simplicity. And so this year in review thing that I write is really just 110, 120 pages a year of childish ideas. And so I try to reduce it to that. Would like to point out they're seeing a bull market and a bubble. This is another one I really like. If you have a position in something that's gone way up, that's a bull market. If something's gone way up and you don't have a position, that's a bubble. It's just that simple. Otherwise, they're the same. Let me think about this. So what I decided I would do is that I would talk about life on a college campus. I've done this before. I titled the talk "The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly." The stories are out there. Colleges deserve scorn. I think that very much so. But the whole story is not being told. The debt problem is very real. To me, the most egregious part of the student debt problem is that if you were deep into debt, the question I ask rhetorically is, are you going to go into your garage after graduation and start a company and change the world? Or are you going to go into a cubicle to pay off your debt? So the question is, how many of these entrepreneurs, how many of these Mark Andreessens and Steve Cases do we have to shut down because they need revenue, because they've got too much student debt before we really hurt the economy? And the answer is a couple, right? Just a couple. And so with $1.3 trillion in student debt and a sense of hopelessness on the part of this generation, the damage is humongous, in my opinion. Okay, so let me tell you first a little bit about the good. It'll sound like I'm talking my book because I am at Cornell, but college really does do good things. Cornell is ranked number 1 in one critical category, which is an important one to me. It turns out that Cornell has more top 10 ranked departments than any school in the country. And not Harvard, not Princeton, not Yale, not MIT, not Caltech, Cornell. And it is because of the diversity of the campus. So I get to see kids every day who are the kid who was coloring in the back of the room. And so we really are training some very smart kids. And these kids, a lot of them are not wasting their money on school. Now, there are some who are. We see much more of the kid who's sitting in the back of the room not taking notes, texting their friends in class. Even with such massive intellects and high SAT scores, there's kids who are wasting their time. And those kids probably shouldn't be there, in my opinion. But as I sit in my office in Olin Hall, which was donated by the Olin Chemical Dynasty, I walk from there, I walk to George Fisher Baker Hall. George Fisher Baker was a peer of J.P. Morgan, to the extent such peers existed. Across the street is a hall donated by Seth Klarman. Down the street, Duffield of PeopleSoft. Up the street a little bit, Gates Hall, over Sandy Wiles' building. Something like 25% of the most expensive faculty on campus are what are called endowed professorships. Betty Yar Miller was the wife of someone who did a lot of fluorine chemistry, was in the Manhattan Project, and made some money and donated the money to pay for my salary. And so the top 25% most expensive people on the campus who are teaching are paid for by the endowment. And the reason I point this out is because it means that money is not coming out of tuition. We're not building. Chuck Feeney, there's one. Chuck Feeney of Duty Free has donated very quietly over $1 billion to Cornell. He built all new dorms and stuff. You say, well, the dorms, you're spoiling the children rotten with nice new dorms. It turns out that if we don't spoil them rotten, they'll go to Princeton, Harvard, or Yale. So we're competing in an arms race. This is a free market-based decision. You show an 18-year-old a new dorm and you give them unlimited amounts of money to borrow, they will come, right? It's kind of a sucker bet. Their frontal cortexes are made of putty. Their parents don't want to stop them. Their parents are thrilled they got in. And so in any event, so the harsh reality is the cost of an education is much, much more than what you see because all these donors, millions, hundreds of millions, billions of dollars worth of donors, they're subsidizing education. And so the cost is so contrary to what Hillary says, it's not free, and it never will be free, right? So then the question that I would like to ask is why is it so expensive? And I'll tell you, one is overbuilding. We're in a real estate boom. We've been in one for a long time. One of my colleagues, who's an expert on university finances, a guy named Ron Ehrenberg, he says that the heyday of colleges and universities is over, in his opinion. He thinks that we've gone through this gigantic boom. We build about $1 billion a decade of new facilities, but we have unbelievable facilities for nanotechnology and stuff, but $1 billion a decade. We've got a bloated administration, right? It's not the president. If you run an organization that complex, you should be paid well, and I don't think they're way overpaid. I once analyzed faculty salaries. I thought maybe they were expanding in the high end, and it turns out that the difference between the ratio of our highest paid chemists to our assistant professors has remained constant for 35, 40 years. So that doesn't explain it. It turns out the salaries have remained constant relative to the graduate student stipends over the same period. So maybe they're all soaring, but it's not super wealthy faculty. By the way, my colleagues have a rep for being these lazy academics. My colleagues bust their ass. In chemistry, my colleagues work 16 hours days. All the way. I've got a 97-year-old colleague who's federally funded. He's drooling, but he's federally funded. He's 1,500 papers in his career. So these guys are animals. They really are animals, and they're culled from the world to be animals. And they're nice people too, interestingly enough. So there's within the bloated administration. There are unfunded mandates that we're facing. So in some sense, we can't even control it. So I just told the other day, we have 11 deans of diversity. I know. You can now clean up the projectile vomits now, right? Now, there's napkins in the back, you know. We have, and the Fed, every time something happens, the Fed tells us to do more. I was talking to our legal counsel, and she's just so frustrated by it. I have very close ties with the legal counsel because I got in a fight with the American Federation of Teachers who were trying to unionize our grad students because their stipends that average around $30,000 a year plus free tuition were not enough for them. And so I single-handedly fought the unions. I was the only faculty member who did. And was a polarizing figure, and in her speech at Cornell, she singled me out as the Sith Lord. And 2,300 grad students voted to unionize, and we won. We opposed the union by 60 votes. The Sith Lord is taking credit for that one. In any case, so the bureaucracy is a problem, but I'm not sure how much we can control it. I think we can at some level, but it's much more outside our control than you might think. So now the ugly. I'm going to try to keep moving here. The ugly is the wave of political correctness ripping across college campuses. Now, I'm told my colleagues are 96% liberal. They're not that bad. I am the conservative member on campus. There's an ancient historian who's a conservative, and there's a guy in the law school who's conservative. I can name two others. I'm going to get one of those pink hats, I don't even dare call it, and I'm going to inscribe on it, "Make America Great," and watch the world have a head explosion. That's my $1 million idea. I'll sell them on Amazon, sell them across campus. I can't imagine. So what's going on? Well, so you've got this political correctness. So somehow students have gone from protesting, right? These are still teenagers, so they're really not working with a full deck, but it's kind of their job to bitch and gripe and save the world, right? We wore bell-bottoms and smoked pot, and some of us tried to oppose the war. I didn't. I was too busy wearing bell-bottoms, smoking pot. But this group not only is protesting, I would say looking internally. saying, I'm not getting enough, right? That's their protest now. I think it's a very selfish kind of a protest. Somehow the adults have given them massive power. So someone screams, and next thing you know, the entire system goes into convulsions to protect this person from feeling bad. They don't have the right. They have the right to be offended. They don't have the right not to be offended, right? That really is the essence. But that's not how the system's responding. It gets sort of gruesome when, you know, a group of kids at a college want to tear down Martin Luther King's most famous quote about dreaming of a world where color doesn't matter because it's not inclusive enough. When the woman who does the vagina monologue, which is a classic feminist thing, right? This is not something that I would normally go to myself. She's not allowed to come because it discriminates against women who don't have vaginas. I'm not kidding you. This is not sarcasm. You have students who want to impose a speech code at almost every school. So they're really wreaking havoc. And it gets worse than y'all heard about Yale. Berkeley riots, for example, I actually think that's got a more subtle subplot. I don't think those were students who were burning down the streets of Berkeley. The Middlebury riots, there's pictures of the kids at Middlebury, and there's two. One looks like geeky Middlebury kids. The other one you look at and you go, there's a lot of tattoos on those guys. I think there's dark forces out there making sure riots happen. I hate to go there, but in any event, so where it really went off the rails, in my opinion, was with Obama. I know I could put a period on that sentence. But Obama used mandates from the Department of Education called Title IX that basically said that you have to clean up your act. And what that was referred to as violence against women. Now, no one in their right mind supports violence against women. And the fear of sounding like somehow you might do that keeps you from opening your mouth. And so actually the problem I'm talking about is exacerbated by the fact that no one dares speak up for fear of being called some sort of Nazi, homophobe, Islamophobe, whatever phobe. Because people get fired for stuff like this. And so he put down these mandates. He basically said, you must punish young boys who behave poorly. And there's some survey that said 20% of women have been sexually assaulted. If you look at the survey, nowhere in the survey is the word rape. There's all sorts of descriptions and stuff, and many of them are what happens in bars on Friday nights. And you could say it's inappropriate behavior, but anyone who's been in a college bar on a Friday night knows that this is not a rape fest going on in there. This is at times gruesome. So the survey was designed to polarize the community. What do we got? 2 minutes, maybe? Yeah. So as a consequence, now we're throwing young men out of college. One of the reasons I got into this is a kid in Ithaca got convicted of sexual assault and 5 years in prison. You say, well, that's not about the campus. Well, yeah, it was a campus. It was a college town-based trial. And there was no DNA. There was nothing. They convicted him on a he said, she said. I've spoken to the kid's family. I've spoken to the kid in prison. He didn't do it. I happen to know the woman. She's a sociopath. I happen to know she's used the system to file charges against other people. I can prove she's abused the system to file charges. They wouldn't let what I knew in court. I could have turned the jury just like I turned to the AFT opposers. And somehow he's in prison now. I think he's a sweetheart of a kid. Kids are getting kicked off campus because the administrators are afraid to not kick them off campus. And one administrator once said, look, if there's a 51% chance that the kid did it, we're not going to kick him off campus forever. I'm going, you don't get to kick him. That's a coin toss, you moron. I once heard one of our administrators say, I've seen data so muddled. I've seen cases which there's so little data that we can't punish the guy severely enough. This was a law professor. And I raised my hand, and he was smart enough not to call on me. Because I would have said, you moron, when you have muddled data or no data, you don't get to do anything. You don't get to do anything in the world I live in. But we are. And it's because we have administrators in the system that are cowards, and they're not stepping up. I, in theory, could lose my job for giving this talk. In theory. They own me. I beat the union. They're not going to fire me. But it's risky. The guy from Yale, 2 professors at Yale, they're jobless right now. Those Yale guys are jobless. So in any event, I'm going to let it go. My advice to you is speak out. I spoke out in favor of Tim Hunt. I spoke out, I speak out on everything. I gave a talk on McCarthyism in an interview, McCarthyism in campuses, and after that thing got published, the guy got fired. They scrubbed his content from the newspaper website. Thank you very much.